Hey everyone, it's Kirsten Hagland here. Welcome to our second episode of Weekly Hope. We're so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for your grace and patience. We were scheduled to go live at 5 p.m. Eastern today, but we're just running a little bit behind because technology is awesome, basically. So thanks for hanging with us, and we're so excited that you're here because we have a ton to discuss, and we want to just dive straight into it. But before we do, I just want to make sure that we are absolutely going live. So I'm going to click over to the Eating Disorder Hope Facebook page and just make sure that this video is up and running. We are golden. Okay. So also, if you've been here before, if you're here for our first episode with Travis Stewart from McAllen Place, you know how this works. Let us know where you're signing in from, what your name is, what your story is. And if you have any questions throughout the broadcast for myself or Dr. Nagib, please use this opportunity to ask those questions, because it's not often that we get to have this live experience with some of these incredible experts. So make sure you tell us hello and type in those questions. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight, and I invited Dr. Margaret Nagib to come on, first of all, because she's incredible and I love her, and I am honored to have been able to work with her for the last about 5 or 6 years when I was at Timberline Knolls, and she is also a friend because it's hard to know Margaret and not be her friend because she's just that cool. But she also happens to be an expert clinician, as well as just a truly humble spiritual being. So can't wait to dive into this topic with her about discovering your desire and some really counterintuitive things that we're going to discuss there. But before we do that, there was something that came up this week, a big news story that I think we really need to talk about. And because it is a huge part of my life and my past, and also because of the subject matter, it relates very much to the eating disorder community. And I just wanted to share what's on my heart about it, as well as my hope and the excitement and joy that I have. And that is regarding everything that happened this week with the new announcement that the Miss America organization would be dropping the swimsuit competition and totally revamping. And I'm just noticing now that you can see Elsa wandering around in the background. Elsa, come here. Do you want to say hi to everyone on Facebook? Yeah, come here. All right, so before we dive into the serious stuff, I'll say hi to everyone. Hello. Welcome to Weekly Hope. Elsa's our recurring guest, actually. So Elsa says hello. So this week, I hope that probably not a ton of you have heard, because I think there's a lot more important things in the world going on than news about the Miss America pageant. But this week there was a big announcement on Tuesday, which I guess was yesterday. And that was that the new chairwoman of the organization, Gretchen Carlson, who was, if in case you don't remember or didn't hear, Gretchen was Miss America in 1989, but she also was most recently a Fox News anchor and was really one of the first women to, in a really public and aggressive way, go after her employer, Roger Ailes at Fox News Channel, for sexual harassment. And that was kind of created this flood of momentum behind the Me Too movement, which has led us to where we are today. With Me Too. And she did that really very courageously, and has been an exceptional role model for so many women in that way. Obviously, she left Fox News Channel. She successfully was a part of Roger Ailes being let go from Fox News, and of course started that torrent of momentum to really hold men in positions of power accountable for treating women with less dignity and respect than they deserve in sexual harassment. So, all that said, Gretchen is the new chairwoman of the Miss America organization, and with that, really said, when I come in, I'm going to make big changes and try to modernize the program for the 21st century. Now, I know that probably some of you are thinking, well, why in the world do we even still need a Miss America competition? And I can totally see that viewpoint. Just as a little bit of history, the Miss America competition started in 1921 in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and it was originally started as a bathing beauty review, And it was put on the first or second weekend of September. I can't remember exactly, but first or second weekend of September to basically try to extend the summer tourist season so that people would stay in town one weekend longer in Atlantic City to see the Bathing Beauty review and see who was crowned Miss America. Quite clearly, the times have changed. And I understand that the subject pageants, now we're calling it a competition, can be quite controversial and can also trigger a lot of emotions within people, especially women. And interestingly enough, so I was Miss America in 2008, which I shared in our launch video. But my grandmother was also Miss Detroit in 1944. She competed at the Miss America pageant in 1945 in its heyday. So I understand the legacy and the tradition that people love about this organization. And I also understand, because I was very jaded about the Miss America competition when I was in high school before I ever competed. And I never actually intended to win, as I've explained before. And so when I found myself in that position, was kind of juggling the emotions of, okay, there are parts of this that I really don't like, and yet how do I use this opportunity for good? So I just want to acknowledge the nuance and complexity of emotional responses to the organization as it exists just generally. So Gretchen Carlson, new chairwoman, came on television on Good Morning America on Tuesday morning, yesterday morning, and announced that the pageant would no longer be called a pageant, that it would be called a competition, that the judging criteria for the women involved, the contestants, would no longer be based on their physical appearance. That means that the swimsuit competition is no longer, and that the evening wear competition is going to be completely revamped to be an expression of a woman's character, of what she wants to wear, if that's an expression of her style, or her advocacy, or whatever it is that she wants to wear to express herself in evening gown, she can wear that. And the judging criteria is not going to be about how expensive or designer her gown is, or that it looks like a typical pageant gown, or her grace or poise, or the way that she looks in it. It's not going to be about that. It's going to be about something more. And I will tell you that I was absolutely elated to hear this news. Of course, it was accompanied by a big press release. I mean, yesterday I was inundated with media and doing media all day yesterday. And what was so exciting was to see just how many people responded so positively to this, how many women responded so positively to this, that this was gone and that this major ethos of the organization was changing. And I'll tell you why I was so happy, mainly 3 reasons. One, because I have seen how much the women who've decided to compete in this program, how much it has shaped their lives for the better, how it has been a vehicle for them to pursue their education, developing leadership and communication skills, and motivating them toward community service, just so many amazing things. And it's helped countless women pay for their college education and graduate debt-free, as it did for myself. I'm Exhibit A. However, that message just gets completely lost, and has gotten completely lost as we continue to have the swimsuit competition. But also I think it's just that the idea of beauty pageants is so entrenched in our culture that we've been trying to rebrand as a scholarship organization for the past 25 years, and it hasn't worked because the cultural perception is so incredibly entrenched. So it really needed to take something huge like this to say, we're not going to be this anymore. We're going to practice what we preach. We're going to be consistent with our values. If we say we're a scholarship awarding organization, that's what we're going to do. And frankly, there's no other organization or no other scholarship in the world that I know of that requires you to walk around in heels, in a bikini, on a stage in front of millions of people watching on TV. It's just not a criteria that there should be for any college scholarship. So I think it's a huge shift in showing the consistency of our values. 2, I applaud its transparency and inclusivity, and that, yes, we want to help. See, this is a cool thing. Miss America has always been about, I mean, since it started, it's really been about trying to create a balance, right? So if you think in 1921, women had just gotten the right to vote in 1920. They were massively underrepresented in higher education, in obviously the workforce, and in literally almost every other area. In the 1940s, the Miss America organization started to award scholarships to try to not only give these women something, but also to try to correct that balance. Now, almost 100 years later, since the program started, let's try to correct another balance, right? We know that college is inordinately expensive. It puts people, men and women alike, into debt for decades after they graduate. So let's not try to just give scholarships to girls, young girls, or their families who can afford a $10,000 evening gown and all the costs that it takes to compete. Let's let them wear whatever they want on stage and open the doors broadly to all women across this country who want to apply for that scholarship and also want to develop leadership communication skills and want to advocate for a platform issue that they're passionate about. It shouldn't be dependent on shape or size. And I think that opening this up to so many more women is really incredible. And third reason why this is just so exciting to me, and then I want to get Margaret's clinical opinion on this from the clinician in the room. The third reason why I'm so excited is just because I have just seen firsthand how harmful the swimsuit competition is to women all over the world. And I'll tell you, when I was Miss America, I got postcards and fan mail from Singapore, from Thailand, from India, from Slovenia, from all over the world. So it's not just young American girls that look up to someone like a Miss America. It's young women everywhere. And rightly or wrongly, they do, right? So you can disagree with the fact that they should, but the fact is they do. And they're writing us letters and they're watching the competition. So what are they seeing? And not only do I think that those young women who look up to Miss America in this country and around the world need to see that a woman is worth so much more than what she looks like, or her hip to waist ratio, or the size of her breasts, or the way she can walk in heels across the stage. Little girls need to see that. But also the girls in the competition, right? So when I competed, I was out of treatment for my eating disorder, and I was in this hyper body positivity mode and really excited to go out there and be like, yeah, like I am so proud and confident of the body that I have now. Like I've worked so hard to love and accept where I am. And so like I was very empowered in that way. However, the net impact of the swimsuit competition is more important than my personal feelings about having been empowered on stage in the swimsuit. It just is. And the net impact is not necessarily good. I believe that it has hurt more women than it has helped. And I know more girls that have done very unhealthy things in order to get in swimsuit shape than I know girls who've done it healthily. And I just don't think that pressure is necessary. It's wrong. And we know that dieting, crash dieting, excessive exercise, et cetera, are the number one predictor of the onset of eating disorders. So just let's not go there. This makes more sense than anything I've heard in a really long time. To eliminate the competition for the health and safety of the women competing and the girls looking up to them. And yeah, so that pretty much wraps up my spiel. Thanks for letting me get on my soapbox for a minute, but I was just so excited about this. I've been really, my views on this crystallized literally as I was traveling on the road as Miss America. And I saw the barrier that things like the swimsuit competition and focus on physical appearance, that barrier, how it impeded the good work that I, as the title holder, and everyone else within the organization was trying to do. And so I'm so incredibly excited. I understand that change is hard for the people within the organization, but you know, and there's a lot of people that aren't happy with this decision. But I was very emotional all day yesterday and like almost crying tears of joy just thinking about like all the little girls who are going to grow up now and not just having to see one more celebrated television show, an American institution that objectifies and hypersexualizes women, whether they feel empowered in it or not. It objectifies them, and also helps the men see women who are held up, honored, valued, and cherished on a national and international stage for more than what they weigh or what they look like in a swimsuit. So that is my piece. And with that, I want to bring in Dr. Margaret Nagib. Dr. Margaret.
Kirsten, how are you?
Margaret.
In Zurich.
Oh, life in Zurich is good. It's
awesome.
It's late here, and it just started pouring down rain right before the Facebook Live started. So I'm hoping that all of you are not hearing the rain. But it's all good. Thank you so much for being here. And before we dive into the topic I want to discuss with you, this happened this week, so, and I think it's great to have an expert on. What are your general thoughts on this?
I had a few. It was good to hear you, summarize it, because I think I've been out of the loop a little bit. But I mean, my first thought was, I grew up watching Miss America and looking up to Miss America. And I think, like you said, there's so many good things about it, and yet there was this disconnect. And so I feel like people like you and people right now in the Miss America world are really pioneers. Yes, there was this disconnect. And so I feel like people like you and people right now there we go. So we're closing the gap, I think, between kind of where the Miss America pageant maybe needs to get up to speed. We're evolving. There was a time when we all sat back and watched that and didn't think anything of it, but we're evolving in our understanding. And so it's amazing to be a part of this time in life where we get to see, right, that evolution, and where friends like you get to be part of the evolution and the pioneering to something new.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually excited about it, and it seems to be the right time for it.
Yeah. And I thank you for that. I think so too. But I also just want to add too that, it's still not a healthy thing for some people to watch or some people to participate in. And so in no way by saying I'm super excited about this change, am I saying like, no, everyone should watch Miss America. Not at all. If it's not your thing, or if it's super triggering for you, or you have a lot of complex emotions surrounding it, like, don't. Totally. Just like I get super agitated by NASCAR racing and I don't watch it. Or like other things that I just don't like watching. Not that NASCAR racing is triggering for me. That actually would be pretty funny. But just, everyone has their thing. And if that's not your thing, then this isn't an encouragement to start watching or whatever. It's just trying to celebrate. The other thing that I think is really important to mention as well is that there's still a long way to go. And as a culture, Miss America is just one segment of the culture. And it's been really easy to point fingers at that, institution or competition as hypersexualizing or objectifying women. But I think we need to be consistent in our values and say, okay, if we're going to have a problem with swimsuits being paraded around and judged in the Miss America competition, we also need to have a conversation about the Victoria's Secret fashion show. And we also need to have a conversation about the way that women are hypersexualized in movies and television shows and advertising. And one thing that I absolutely love about the eating disorder community is that they're totally on that. I mean, there's so many great organizations that are doing like media literacy training and trying to, make sure that young girls know that their body is not just an object and not just an object for sexual attractiveness, that it's more than that. And I think that is a message we need to carry into society, because I think in some ways Miss America has been not necessarily unfairly targeted, but unfairly bearing the brunt of a lot of that criticism.
Yeah, I mean, we need voices like yours. I mean, I feel the way I feel, I think because I know you, and I know that you've seen it, and I've heard your story, and like you said, we don't hear both sides of the story, and we do have a long way to go. And like you said, it's across our culture. And so, but every part, right? It's every seed plays a part. And so it is a part, it's a part of the puzzle. It is exciting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and one last thing is that you can make a difference and your voice makes a difference. And this is actually a perfect segue into talking about desire, because I never thought in a billion years that when I was in treatment for my eating disorder that I would ever like speak to Congress or speak at Anita Walk or start traveling around the country, talking to college girls or doing what I'm doing now 10 years later. I never in a million years thought that I would have the opportunity to do this. But, and I've been basically talking to my fellow former Miss Americas, other contestants and members of the board for the last 10 years about how irrelevant and unnecessary I think the swimsuit portion of the competition is. And to now see that actually changing is incredible. So I just want you to know, like, keep using your voice and keep standing up for what you believe in, and be true to your values. And it might take 10 years, it might take 20, but change does happen and your voice does matter. So do not ever doubt that. And I learned that lesson again today, because there are definitely times when I felt discouraged in all these issues, but your voice truly does matter. So that's my last little bit. So Margaret, let's talk about desire. When we had our pre-interview, our call and our talk last week, we decided to focus on this. It's one of the chapters in your book, and I think we talk about values a lot and vision for recovery, but plugging into what your desires actually are is fundamental in any kind of spiritual recovery process, or non-spiritual recovery process, frankly. So first of all, I would love for you to give us the download on your book, that Souls Like Stars, and I think you have a copy of it with you, and a little intro into what the chapter on desire is about.
Sure. And I wrote this book. It started off as a book for Timberline, for the women who come. And as I was writing it, it really turned into more than that. It was such an amazing process, believe it or not, to write that book, and an unexpected process. But this book started off as a book for
Sorry, Margaret.
It's okay. The chapter on desire was one of my favorite chapters. And I think it's because as I work with women in particular, I do work with men with eating disorders as well. And actually it applies to them now that I think about it. One of the underlying themes that I was finding is that in the process of getting caught up in the eating disorder, they lose touch with who they really are, right? And the eating disorder becomes their identity and becomes their way of feeling fulfillment and success and all of those wonderful things that we all want deep down inside of us. And so the chapter on desire really talks about reconnecting with that and rediscovering, with eating disorders, body image is a big part of that. And I never want to underestimate the biological aspect, the spiritual aspect, the psychological aspect. But underneath every eating disorder is some kind of underlying issue where at the core of that person, there's something that doesn't feel right. They don't feel worthy of what who they truly are. And so reconnecting women with that, men with that, is a passion of mine, because I think it's a really spiritual, it's a spiritual task of reconnecting with the essence of who you are. And the essence of who you are is connected with your desire. So that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what I think is really interesting is how do you, because I know not only you write and you speak, but you also, work directly with individuals who are recovering. How do you help someone find what their desires are, what their values are? Because I know I remember, and I know talk to so many other people who feel the same way, that you completely lose sight of what your desires are, because as you mentioned, the eating disorder becomes your identity, but also you don't really desire much. I mean, so much of the emotional experience has been blunted by eating disorder behaviors. So how do you even get someone into this space where they can figure out what their desires actually are?
Yeah. So, what you're saying is exactly right. We shift from being subjects of our desire to objects of our desire. We shift from knowing what our desires are to focused on desirability, right? Like that's part of, I think, the beef that people have with Miss America is it's all about, am I desirable as a woman? And I want to turn that on its head and say, what are your deepest desires? So when you think that being desirable is the way to that, or that's who you are, then absolutely you lose touch with your ability to desire. So you switch it over. But the eating disorder and the behaviors that someone gets caught up in end up being like this metaphor of what they're really looking for. There's like hidden messages in all of it. So we actually really start off by talking about what is it that you want, that you use your eating disorder to get. You know, well, I want to be thinner, or I want to be, and why do you want to be thinner, right? And so we kind of deduce down back to what that really good golden nugget is that the person is trying to achieve. And yet not recognizing that they're caught in a trap. They're never going to achieve it with the eating disorder as the way to get there.
Yeah. What, and how difficult is it, or must it be, for people who start to struggle when they're really, really young? I mean, I think of an adolescent brain, a child's brain, which is forming, and even sometimes before 10 years old. I mean, this is an old statistic that the average age that a girl begins to diet is 8 years old. I would imagine that, sadly, unfortunately, stupidly, it's probably younger now, and that can make all of us extremely mad for the right reasons. But for those kind of dieting behaviors and self-image starting to be created, and desire starting to be created at such a young age when the brain isn't even fully developed, you know, I think probably there's a lot of discouragement people who get treatment maybe in their 20s or 30s or much later in life, when their adolescent brain was so impacted by eating disorder behaviors.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting that, like, for the example of the 8-year-old who decides they want to diet, why did that 8-year-old want to diet? What came into their sphere of influence that made them want to diet? I have worked with some younger patients who weren't as connected with culture, and they still developed eating disorder symptoms, but it looked different. It didn't look like, hey, I need to go on a diet and my thighs need to be thinner. You know, they still had the eating disorder symptomology without that cultural impact. But even then, at 8 years old, you know, what is it that that little girl is wanting? I was in New York this weekend for my niece's birthday, and my 5-year-old niece came up to me and she showed me this picture of a book cover, and it had Barbie on it, but it was a very elaborate Barbie with like a peacock wings. She had peacock wings, and she had some kind of like ethnic garb on. She looked like maybe Anna or Elsa. And she said, Margaret, I want this book. And I looked at the picture of the book and I said, oh, Emma, I could see it's beautiful. There's colors. And I said, what do you like about it? And she zoomed in on Barbie's face. I thought she was going to say the peacock feathers, the costume. She zoomed in on Barbie's face and said, I like her face, and I like her golden hair. And I looked at Barbie's face and her golden hair, and I thought to myself, she's beautiful. And my 5-year-old niece doesn't know like that this is the ideal. She just sees beauty, and she wants beauty, and we all long for beauty. We long for it in ourselves. We long for it in what we see outside of us. And it's not till later that we start to feel shameful. You know, right now she's in that beautiful stage where there is no shame. She's not looking at that picture and saying, I need to look like this. That's when we cross over that line. So for that 8-year-old saying, I need to go on a diet, somewhere she's crossed over that line. She feels shameful about who she is. And so she wants to change that. And then, like you said, so aptly, sometimes it innocently starts off as just, I'm not going to eat my lunch today. And then if you have that proclivity, genetically and otherwise, towards an eating disorder, the slippery slope, you know, can begin. And if you don't have that proclivity, well, then you may struggle with disordered eating, you know, some version of disordered eating.
Yeah. No, I want to get some of our comments in here. I just want to say hi to Sarah and some others who've joined, Catherine as well. I think I saw Kathy on here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Sarah asks, what if you know what your desires are, but the eating disorder, doesn't let you get there, and it makes you so afraid to move forward? Which is an interesting question, because it's like recognizing the desires are there, but the motivation is not powerful enough, or perhaps the perceived risk is too large to actually, or really, but see, this is what's counterintuitive. We talked about this before in our pre-call, and I'd love for you to address it, because it's not as though the desires are totally different, the desires and your true healthy self desires. It's just that they're expressed in different ways, or the path to achieving them the paths are different.
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting that she says she knows what they are. And so the first thing I want to say to her is, good going. Like that is, that in and of itself, like you said, you're so bogged down by the symptoms and your brain's not even working right nutritionally, right? That you don't even know what you want. So the fact that you know, oh, you're like halfway there. That's such a beautiful thing. So I don't want you to be discouraged. Now what I want you to do is really go into those desires. Think about those desires. Why do you like those desires? Knowing that, you know, depending on what those desires are. And then after a while, you begin to see a path, you know? So right now she's still seeing the trap of the eating disorder. It still feels stronger to her. So like the metaphor I tell people is, I love the story. It's a true story of spider monkeys. They live in Brazil. And unfortunately, people try to trap them. And they've come up with this great way to trap them. There's these naturally occurring gourds in their environment. They'll hollow out the gourd, put a peanut in the gourd, and the monkey will find it, put its little paw in there. But the minute it grabs the peanut, the circumference is now too small. But if it lets go of the peanut, right, then it can have its paw back. And so I think maybe what she's experiencing is that I have it, but I don't quite have it. And so if that's what you're experiencing, it's just a big fat trap. It's like there's some sense of I can have it, but I can't have it. And so then we begin to talking about, well, what are the lies that the monkey is believing, right? That the monkey won't let go. And how can we begin to look at some of the losses of this thing that I've put my hope in, right? Hope and desire go hand in hand. And so how can I begin to look at that, let go of that thing that gives me a taste of it, but not completely, and then begin to turn my attention towards desires always bring life. Always, always, always. If you're pursuing your desire and it's not being twisted by something else, it will always bring life. If you feel trapped, chances are you're putting your hope in something that's hopeless. And so she may be trying to sort all of that out. And to that, I say, keep going. Don't stop while you're in such a good place.
Yeah, no, it's so good. And Sarah actually is writing back. She said yes, which is awesome. But, and you know, it makes me think too of something else that we discussed, and that's just even for people in the regular world who don't struggle with eating disorders per se, but perhaps struggle with other issues, depression, anxiety, PTSD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or even much less severe issues. How do our values get so skewed? How do our I think if you sit someone down in a quiet setting where they're alone and they can really think, they could probably tell you what they desire most in a very simple way, like I want to be happy, or I want to be surrounded by people that love me. You know, like the super basic foundational human things. And yet we sell our souls to work, to good grades, to status, to pleasing others, to a body ideal. It's like everyone picks their poison in some way. And yet I think we all know, and I think it's one of the reasons why, too, there's like this collective unhappiness, because everyone knows they're really not living true to their desires.
Yeah.
So why do we get so off base?
Yeah. So this is usually when I talk to people about how we're made up, right? So the way I see it, I try to simplify it, even though we're very complicated creatures. Yeah. But we're body, we're soul, we're psyche, we're mind, we're body, we're mind, and we're spirit. And it's our spirit that is connected with our desires, right? That's why I love little kids, because they haven't gotten jaded yet. They haven't gotten clouded yet. They don't know what shame is yet. They're purely living out of, their spirit and their desire. And then life happens, and adulting happens, and all of these things happen, wounds happen. So, we can get a little off balance where we're living more out of the woundedness, or we're living more out of these ideals that are really beliefs that we don't even hold, but we've been told, well, you'll be valuable if. And it's connected to shame. So part of it is identifying what causes shame. So if I'm going after a goal, but at the end of the day, I feel crappy, chances are it's a shame-based goal. I've decided that I'm going to be a better person if I do this, instead of stopping and going, what is it that really makes me come alive, and shifting over to that. And you know, I think you need to be brave to do that in our society, because society loves to tell us what's desirable, not only physically, but with success and other things. And the number one shame button for women is appearance. So don't be surprised. Every woman cross-culturally, you touch their button just by talking about their appearance. And every man cross-culturally, their shame button is weakness, which is also attached to shame. So it's really about becoming more and more self-aware and learning that you matter and that your feelings matter. So if you're caught up in the rat race and you feel crappy, you matter. And if you have to take time off or you have to quit your job, you're worth that. So there's lots of ways to get there, but it starts with balancing the equation and maybe identifying some spiritual practices to reconnect you with what you really love. You know, I love watching you with Elsa, and I think it's hysterical because, you know, I follow you on social media and we're friends and whatever, and like Elsa's everywhere. You know, even today, Elsa made an appearance. But what that tells me about you is there's something about Kirsten and animals. Like she's one of those people. Like I picture you like Cinderella. You know, you walk into the forest and the little bird comes and sits on your finger because you look at you. See, it's so true.
Me, yes, man.
That thing, and that says a lot about Kirsten, not your personality. It says a lot about your heart, your soul, your spirit. Yeah. And so those are the kind of things that I say get connected to. I mean, that is such a simple thing. Like go out and get a dog and it'll change your life. For you, yeah, because it's so attached to your deepest, truest desire of who you are. Now, for me, that might not be it. It might be just as something as simple. Like I have this thing with mountains. You know, in Chicago, there are no mountains. And when it's cloudy and I'm on the highway, I will pretend that the clouds are mountains. Because they help me transcend, right? They help me get out of my head and connect it, I think. And so whatever that is for you, that's really not hard to figure out. What were the things that you loved when you were little? What were the things that you used to do before you had an eating disorder? What are the things that make you giggle and smile like Kirsten just did, you know, when I talked about Elsa?
And I love that. That's so cool. And I actually think about that a lot too. And I think part of it is consciously remembering, being intentional about remembering. Like I'll go this week when everything with Miss America was happening, I was going back and thinking of, I mean, I go often and do like conscious memory exercises a lot. And I hate to call them exercises because I don't think like, oh, I'm going to start consciously remembering today. But I love animals. I love music. I also love mountains. But music is another big thing. And often I'll just take walks and I'll listen to music. And I just think through so many things that have happened in my life and times when I felt close to God or times when I really felt like my truest self and had feelings and emotions and a connection that transcended whatever was going on around me. And I continue to have those moments and I continue to have reminders of those in my daily life. And it's like remembering things that would happen as a 5-year-old, 10-year-old little girl, and seeing some of those same joys, those same desires fulfilled and things happen in my life now. There's just this beautiful tapestry of life that is woven from our, as you mentioned, the things that would make you giggle and smile from when you were young. And it's almost like you have to consciously in some way go to a place where you can reconnect with that. And, you know, I want to ask you, because I was thinking about it as you were talking about men and women's shame buttons, what encouragement can you give people who are maybe in the first stages of recovery or coming out of their recovery process, like transitioning back into the real world? Because we can get in a real like recovery cocoon bubble, I think, with people who speak the language of eating disorder recovery and who are very educated and about these things and very supportive, very loving. And then you go out into the real world and you get confronted with people who say things like they pat their belly and they go, oh, I wish I had an eating disorder. Or, you know, just that kind of stuff. you know the people I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That can make it very easy for that person to slip right back into the mental process of like, how stupid were you to think that, just all that negative self-talk comes up again. Like, how silly to think, how weak is it to just think about your desires, and people can't really have what they want, or that's just childish, or, what do you do for that person newly in recovery who starts to feel strong about what they desire and then they're confronted with reality?
Yeah. The reality is there is a reality, and there are people out there who aren't going to understand. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I feel like every time I get close to real breakthrough in my life, like some kind of test happens, right? Like that person who says that thing that throws you off, or whatever that is. And what I want people to know is when you're getting towards that depth of knowledge about yourself, expect it. There are going to be things that come against that. But it's all an opportunity to grow and learn. And so every time that happens, it shows me like, oh, okay, I'm still growing in this, not quite there yet. But let me get with some of my friends, and let me get with my tribe, and let me process this out, and talk about it with people who get it and understand it. So I think it's okay to have those recovery friends, and also acknowledge that there are going to be challenges. Not everyone's going to see it the way you see it. And at some point you make a choice that my wholeness and my desire is more important to me than someone who thinks differently than me. And you know what? If I had the thoughts that that person had, which probably I used to have, right, back in the day, then I would believe the same thing. So it's really about almost not getting offended and not getting triggered, and recognizing everyone's entitled, like you don't like NASCAR. Everyone's entitled to how they see things, but I don't have to crumble every time someone doesn't see something the way I see it. I may lick my wounds, I may feel really hurt, and then I, do the work I need to do to get back on my feet. And until I get to that place where that becomes less and less of feels like less of an attack. And that's just a growth thing. I think we all go through that process, whether you have an eating disorder or not, am I going to stand and be who I am unashamedly, right? I mean, I know I'm still definitely working on that, and my insecurities pop up all the time. And I just go, hi, insecurity. Nice to see you. It's been a while.
I love that. And that's such a perfect, that's such a perfect insight. For Sarah wrote back and said, explaining about how she's starting at university in a month and embarrassed about how I look as I have just weight restored nutritionally, which can be a big fear for someone in that phase. And thank you, Sarah, for being honest about that. But I think that what you said is just such a good application to that. And also like the recognition that you can be a healed, recovered, like generally healthy person and still have insecurities, Like I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that sometimes in recovery we expect, if I'm totally recovered, I'm never going to be scared about what other people think. I'm always going to have the perfect response when someone's judgmental. I'm just going to walk around in a cloud of grace and compassion and never feel any negative emotion.
You're going to be perfect. Yeah. And you wouldn't want to, right? Because that's not the stuff of life. That's not the richness of life. And like I said earlier, we've always talked in the eating disorder world about how body image is the last symptom to go. But if you understand the shame research, every woman, universal shame button is appearance. So, learn to make friends with that feeling of like those times when those things get triggered. It's just your shame being triggered. And so it's an opportunity, to grow and to continue to grow. And as far as being judged at school, I mean, we don't know that. In many ways, that's like shame forecasting. Like, here's this wonderful new venture in your life. There's probably some really good desire under that you're actually beginning to achieve, right? By going back to school. And you've broken through the eating disorder symptoms to be able to get back to school. So remember, why is it that I'm going? What goal do I have in going to school? What wonderful thing am I going to get to pursue? And try not to forecast shame into a situation where you don't know that. You don't know that you're going to be judged. Chances are you're probably judging yourself. And so how can you have compassion on yourself and the judgments you already have, because your body's maybe larger than it was, you know, pre-recovery.
Yeah. And also what I think is so interesting too about that is that even, and I learned this on the road as Miss America, is that even at days where I thought I was my best, and I satisfied my insecurities in every way, people were still not pleased with me. People were still judging me, and people were still doing all the things that I feared they were going to do when I was having a bad day or felt insecure, you know? So long as we place our sense of self-worth or value on other people's judgment, we're never going to be able to be secure, because it's happening even when you feel your best. People are still judging you. You know, I mean, it's like, and as are we, you know, and I think that's also a really good like self-examination tool to go, how judgmental am I of others about whatever it is, without really knowing them, or without knowing all the details and the facts. You know, Margaret, we could talk about this all day long. And I definitely want to have you back on to talk about more of the chapters in your book. But before we go and we tell everyone where they can purchase Souls Like Stars and where they can read more of your stuff, because you're just brilliant. And again, we're really, really honored to have you on. I just want to go back and highlight, you talked about shifting the mindset from desirability, like, am I desirable, to how do I find out what my own desires are, which I think is so cool. But then I would love for you to leave us with maybe just a couple tips or practices that you can suggest for people to do to reconnect with what their desires are, and find stability and a foundation for recovery in that. Like for me, like I talked about, it's part of it's music and part of it's, you know, walking Elsa and being in nature, but what can people do?
Right. So I talk about in the book, and I start at the basic level, right? Before even thinking about what are the dreams you have, because dreams are another way to your desire. I talk about 3 major categories, and I can even put them in the link on the website. But the first one is safety, security, and peace. We have desires that are connected with this desire for safety, security, and peace. The next level is achievement and recognition. We all want to be recognized, and sometimes when we fear being judged, if you flip it on your head, the desire is to be recognized. Like, oh, look how amazing you are that you accomplished this and that you're here at college. And then the third one is success, personal power. Some of our desires relate to that. And the last 2 are belonging and connection, and then love and joy. So even if you just take that list of the major categories of desire and think about in each list, starting to list out, you know, for love and joy, what does that look like for me? How do I feel love and joy? Success and achievement, what does that look like for me? What are the desires under that? And just starting really small and beginning. And even if you only come up with 2 things, you know, that's okay. That's a start. And then you can start to build off of that. But the more you give attention to your desire, the less that track seems desirable, and the more you can build from that. So I'll put those in the link, and people can have that.
I love that. So cool. Margaret, thank you so much. You're awesome. Can you let everyone know, and do you have a copy of the book there? You can show everyone
I can show them the cover.
Yes, because the thing about this book is not only is it Pearls of Wisdom from Margaret, but which is always great, but it's actually visually stunning. It's beautiful.
So, can you see this? Here's the cover. And then if you look inside, it's really made like it's kind of a grown-up picture book. There's just amazing photography all throughout, because I just really wanted it to be an experience. So if you just go to Amazon.com, put in Souls Like Stars or my name, Margaret Nagib, it'll pop right up. Perfect.
Wonderful. And I know you've written a lot of really great content for Eating Disorder Hope, as well as the Timberline Knolls blog on timberlineknolls.com. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing, they can go there. And you are also speaking all over the country all the time. So you can check out, as Timberline Knolls is a really generous sponsor of Eating Disorder Hope. We always feature events that clinicians like you are doing. So check out our Eating Disorder Hope Twitter and Facebook page for where Margaret's going to be speaking, as well as Timberline Knolls, which is Timberline Today on social media, and you can follow her. So with that, just want to say thank you again to everyone for tuning in. This video is going to stay live for the next week until next Wednesday, which is June. Let me make sure I'm getting the date correctly. Next week is June 6th. No, today's June 6th. Next week is June 13th. And we'll be on again at 5 p.m. Eastern time next weekend with Jessica Setnick, who's a clinician as well. And stay tuned for the topic for next week. But just want to make sure that you know how to get connected with us. And let us know your thoughts. Share this video with your friends. It will also be on our YouTube page, on the Eating Disorder Hope YouTube channel, so you can watch it again if you want. And I'll be also, and all of us at Eating Disorder Hope will be looking at the comments section throughout the week. So if you have a question and you aren't watching this live, you can still ask it, and we'd be happy to chat with you about it. But thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful, beautiful evening. And Margaret, thank you again for your heart and for really being, you know, a lot of therapists, clinicians, etc. can be very, very scary for people in recovery, but you are a real human being, and for that, I admire you very, very much.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you. That's Dr. Margaret Nagib. She's the faculty leader at Timberline Knolls and the author of Souls Like Stars, which you can find at Amazon. And Kirsten Hagland, it's been a joy to spend this time with you. And we can't wait to see you next week at 5 p.m. Eastern on our next episode of Weekly Live. All right, have a wonderful, beautiful, blessed night. See you next week.